As a kid, Halloween was my favorite time of year. We used to go trick-or-treating, and we always looked for houses that had the best candy. One year when I was around 11 years old, my friends and I were out trick-or-treating, and we ran into some older kids. They were probably too old to be trick-or-treating, but that didn't keep them from trying to brace us for our candy. We were able to run away from them, but what we didn't know was that they were following us. We also didn't know that they were planning to play a prank on us. A prank that went seriously wrong. We were walking down the street and suddenly, from between two houses, something flew over our heads and smacked into a car driving down the street. The driver slammed on the brakes, coming to a screeching halt. The next thing we knew, he was out of his car and storming our way with an angry look on his face. We were too shocked to run because this was an adult, and we knew an adult would never hurt us, or so we thought. This man had to be in his late 40s or early 50s, and he had a grizzled-looking face with a beard and a mustache that were unkempt. He also looked as angry as anybody could be. He started shaking his finger at us, asking who had thrown the piece of pumpkin at his car. Up until then, we didn't know what had been thrown over our heads, but when I looked in the street, I saw a big chunk of pumpkin lying next to the man's car. Of course, we denied it because we hadn't done it, but that didn't seem to matter to the man. He just got madder and madder. After about 4 or 5 minutes of back and forth argument, he slowly raised his shirt to reveal that he had a gun tucked into his belt. That's when we freaked out and we started running. He started screaming for us to stop, but there was no way we were doing that. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw him standing there, and he had the gun in his hand now. My heart was hammering in my chest, and we all took off in different directions. That's when I heard the first shot. And I could swear I felt something whiz by my head. I cut between two houses and found myself in a backyard. That's when I heard the car engine roar down the street. As I knew the man was looking for us. I was in a total state of panic, so I took a hard left and ran through another person's backyard and vaulted over their fence. I dropped my candy, but I didn't care about it anymore. I ran across a couple more backyards and I saw the man's car as he looped around to come after us. After a few minutes that seemed like an eternity, I found my way to my house and told my parents. They called the police, but by the time they got there was no sign of the man or his car. I can tell you, I was really pissed at those older kids for playing that prank on us. And I was very careful after that, always looking over my shoulder when I was trick-or-treating. When I was a kid, I grew up in a pretty boring but very safe suburban neighborhood. There were lots of kids in the neighborhood that were around my age, and we became fast friends, playing sports and just goofing off. Summer was like one big recess for all us kids. By the time I was 10 or 11, I pretty much had the run of the neighborhood and could go where I wanted to. Also, by that age, I was able to go trick-or-treating by myself with my friends, without my parents walking behind me chaperoning. Having your parents follow you around was the pits and made me feel like a baby. Like I said, the neighborhood was very safe, but there was one house on the edge of the neighborhood that had been there long before the suburban houses had gone in. While our homes looked modern, this one was old and looked like it had been built around the turn of the century. It was a house that we avoided on most occasions because there was a man inside that we didn't really know, but the older kids said he was a real creeper. For my part, I'd never seen the man, but he was a bit of a legend in the neighborhood and not a good one. On Halloween night, we went from house to house in the neighborhood, getting treats and not playing too many tricks. There were a couple houses where some of the more generous parents gave out full-size candy bars, and those were the most prized items. After we circled the entire neighborhood, we ended up nearby the old creeper's house. One of my friends dared me to go up and knock on his door. There were no lights on, so I thought that meant he wasn't open for business. So I told my friends that I wouldn't, but they wouldn't stop daring me. So to keep my pride, I felt like I had to take the challenge, and I went up those creaky stairs to his front door. My heart was pounding in my chest as I waited to knock on the door. It took every bit in me to make that happen. I pulled back my hand and let my fist rap onto the door. Just after I knocked on it, it slowly opened, sounding like every spooky door opening you'd ever heard in your life in a horror movie. Creaking loudly, I stood there in that open doorway, just thinking I had made the most terrible mistake and that my life would end in mere seconds. One of my friends said I could leave, but I was frozen there, unable to move. Time seemed to slow down. Then a voice came from inside. It said,
"Come on in."
That was all I needed to break me from my trance. I whirled around and jumped down those stairs, and I ran like the very hounds of hell were chasing me all the way back to my house. From then on out, we avoided that house on every Halloween. One Halloween, I was really too old to go trick-or-treating. The neighbors a few houses away had 2 small children, and they were very overprotective parents. So the kids couldn't go trick-or-treating, but the parents wanted to go out on Halloween night to a Halloween office party. So they asked me if I was willing to babysit their 2 kids. They gave the kids plenty of candy so they wouldn't complain about not being able to trick-or-treat, and they gave me $50, which was a lot of money for me, so I was glad to do the job. At least at first, because things got really scary as the night went on. The first trick-or-treaters came by and we handed out candy. The little kids I was watching seemed delighted as they got to see all the different costumes the kids were wearing when they came by trick-or-treating. Our town has a longer than normal trick-or-treat schedule, stretching out about 3 hours. That left trick-or-treaters coming to almost 9 o'clock. The kids' parents said they would need to be in bed no later than 9:30. So I worked to get them off to bed, and I could watch a scary movie after trick-or-treat was over. No sooner than I got the kids to bed than I heard a knock on the door. I turned the front porch light off to tell trick-or-treaters that we weren't taking any more kids. Whoever was there knocked again. Still, I didn't want to go to the door, so I went to one of the front windows and looked out and saw a dark figure on the stoop of the house. The figure did not look like a kid at all. In fact, it looked like a full-grown adult. This got me fairly nervous as my mind went right to Michael Myers. Things got worse when they knocked hard again. And they even tried to open the door. But fortunately, it was locked. I had no intention of opening that door. I picked up my cell phone and considered calling the police right away, but I decided to wait. When I looked out the window again, whoever it was gone. So I thought. I slipped back into the house and watched through the windows on the front of the house for a few minutes. That's when I saw someone moving along the side of the house. It was so dark I couldn't tell who they were, but I thought it was a man and they looked fairly big. That's when I dialed 911. I told the operator that somebody was creeping outside this house I was watching. They said they could send somebody, but it would be several minutes. I knew that whoever was outside could be inside long before the police arrived. So I called my dad and he said he would be right over since they were just a few houses away. I looked out the windows again and I saw the figure moving along. I was close to total panic by then. That's when I heard someone knock on the door again, which really scared me. Were there 2 people outside? I stood there, frozen in place, not knowing what to do. Should I answer the door? Should I stay where I was? That's when I heard another knock on the door. And and then I heard my father's voice coming through the door, saying it was him. I immediately ran for the door and opened it. He had a ball bat in his hands and he looked ready to take on whoever or whatever was around the house. But when we looked around outside, there was no one there. Whoever it was must have been scared off when my dad got there. I was never happier in my life to see my father. The police got there a few minutes later and they did a full-scale search of the neighborhood. They didn't find anyone. They did find footprints of a large man in the dirt around the house, proving my story was true. I decided $50 wasn't enough money, so I said I was busy when those parents asked me again to watch their kids on the next Halloween.